What's up, Tolkien Poppers? I've got a super nerdy episode. We're going to talk to my friends Will Rose, Christian Ashley, and Joshua Knoll from Systematic Geekology and the Anazao Ministries Network. And I was a part of Systematic Geekology podcast network until I kind of went out and did some creative stuff on my own, and we still collaborate. And here I finally got to get them on my podcast, and so I'm very excited to have them here. But the upcoming episode, we are going to talk about just being a fan of certain IPs with a specific emphasis on Tolkien. But we're going to talk about how fan communities can be places of healing and wholeness, and how we can make them better when, just like all human communities, at some point there's going to be toxic people. So how do we deal with that? How do we keep our nerdy spaces safe for everybody and good for all of us? And we're going to promote Theology Beer Camp, because if you want to hang out with all the nerds, there's a pop culture stage this year at Theology Beer Camp, which is October 16th through the 18th in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I'll have a link in the show notes. But if you want to hang out with people of the same ilk, you won't want to miss it. And I'll leave it there. I'll let you just enjoy the conversation between me and the priest to the geeks here. All right, talk to you guys later. What's up, everybody? This is Nick, and I am here with the systematic geekologists extraordinaires from the Systematic Geekology podcast. I've got some of the co-hosts here because the amount of hosts on Systematic Geekology are legion, but today I've got three whom I love and adore. I've got Christian Ashley here. I've got Joshua Knoll, who I think is the founder of Systematic Geekology and all the Anazao Ministry stuff ish, kind of, right? Something like that. And then I've got Will Rose, and I am just so pumped that we get to hang out and nerd out. So I guess how are you guys doing? I'll go down the line here from order from my screen, but Christian, how are you, first of all?
Man, I'm doing well. Post-seminary graduation, I've mastered divinity itself. Now I just need to master finding a job, and I'll feel a lot better.
Yeah, master that divine. Unfortunately, the real world doesn't, take that into account. All right. So I heard Will's voice. So Will, also,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
a master of divinity, correct? Yeah, are you a master of
yeah,
the divine?
yeah. Back in the day, I put it into practice in some areas of life. Other areas still growing. We're also all in a process of mastering divinity. So but I'm feeling pretty poppy today, and I'm glad to be on the podcast. You were part of Systematic Geekology for a while, and your avatar was a wizard.
Yeah.
So that's like right in continuity with what you do here. We know what we're doing. So yeah, glad to be a part of our conversation, man. This is fun.
Yeah, I was a part of Systematic Geekology. I had a really good time, and obviously I'm still here, and I hang out with them. And we all get to hang out at Theology Beer Camp, sans Christian, because he is a man of his word and doesn't do bad things like sin and drink and smoke
And talk to those who do.
Yeah, it's true. But I won't be there for Theology Beer Camp. We'll talk about it later, but it's just good to be here with everybody. And then last but definitely not least, we have Joshua Knoll. How are you, Big Papa?
Doing good. I instead of mastering the divine, I met Nick and just befriended him. I don't know what these other guys are doing, so
Yeah.
it's fine.
And there was a theology beer camp where Nick and Joshua came to my house and hung out with my dog Woody. Helped me let
It's true.
Woody out.
Will introduced me.
Met my dog Reston Wolf, dude. Yeah, that was good times. Good memory. That's a good memory.
Yeah.
Such a good
I saw
memory.
Will in person for the first time. Complimented the size of his head, and then he said, "Josh, look, here's the only other person I can see your age with a beard. Talk." And then we became friends.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
What's
This is
the
it's like describe a movie badly. This is like me describing Theology Beer Camp badly.
What's the lineage what's the technical term when you get ordained, like the chain of like authority or whatever? What's the technical term? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like where
Apostolic succession.
There it is.
Yes,
but,
yes.
But I feel like Josh and I have apostolically succeeded from Woody.
Yeah.
Like we're one of the few who have been in
That's
the
right.
vicinity of Woody. So I feel
That's
like a
right.
student. I feel very,
Yeah.
very
legend.
beyond
The
blessed.
legend, the myth. Yeah.
Woody.
Yeah.
Legend's a
R.I.P..
myth.
Yeah.
Woody's
Yeah.
a myth maker, and we'll talk about myth makers today.
Oh
But
yeah, all of us who've met Woody, we get to say we have wood, and it's just that's how it goes.
Yeah.
Like Jesus, he was a carpenter. He worked with wood.
I was about to go way dirtier.
I know,
But
I
you
was
went
about to
like Jesus Carpenter. I was like, all right, there we go. You lured me in and then bait and switched me. I'm like, all right, good. Thank you, Josh. Keep us on track.
I think that from now on, we're systematic geekology. Like we have the recording from Christian for when we say naughty things, and he says the discretionary thing for parents because
Yeah.
Christian's a good person and he likes to
Listener
warn
discretion.
people of like when we're inappropriate. I'm gonna create a discretionary I need an advisory recording of me saying, guys, I'm sorry, this episode I was off my meds. And I feel like they should be warned ahead of time
Yeah.
of that as well.
I approve of that.
I approve.
So there won't be any changes needed to be made. It'll be every episode you're on.
This podcast was recorded while Josh was out his meds. Enjoy.
So
Who know reverse cards will be had here in this place.
Speaking of people off their meds, ADHD and wood, who else had ADHD and loved wood was J.R.R. Tolkien.
Oh, hey,
Ooh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Nice.
So that's what we call a smooth transition, the biz, in the podcast biz. But legitimately, we're here. I brought Systematic Ecology on because we've done some Tolkien stuff on Systematic Ecology, but Systematic Ecology runs the gambit of all the nerdy fandoms, and so I wanted to bring you all here into the orbit of Tolkien, and specifically, put you through the gauntlet here. But similar to like our order here of introducing yourselves, I really just wanted to hear about y'all's Tolkien experience, your first encounter with his works, maybe his adaptations, and your current relationship with him in his work, maybe, or even adaptations, old or new. So yeah, I'm just going to run down the line here. And Christian, tell us about your Tolkien experience.
Yeah. Mine's going to be a fairly common story for people of our age. My first introduction was to film. Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, and it's like, man, this is really good. And then my dad told me, look, they're going to make more movies, but they're based off of these books. And as someone who's always been a huge reader, it's like, well, give me the books. And so we bought them. And one of the things my dad would do when I was younger is he'd read things to me at night. So we read through the series before the other movies came out. So when the next movies came out, it's like, oh, that's this. Oh, they took that out. It's like, oh, man, I wish they'd done this. But you know what? It's fine. They are what they are. They're wonderful introductions, to the books themselves. Out of all of them, I've reread The Hobbit the most. It just feels quaint to me, and it just feels very nice and good. And yeah, there's peril every now and then, but at the end of the day, I know it's going to be okay because it's a prequel. But right now, I was going to read all 4 books and going to try the Silmarillion before we did this episode because I was actually in Gatlinburg with my grandmother's condo with my dad, but unfortunately we had a family member pass away, so we cut that short, and I wasn't able to get through all the books there. So everyone's okay now, as okay as you can be after something like that. But yeah, that's where I am. Not to put a downer on anything, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that, and just experiencing joy within sorrowful moments is very Tolkienian. So I'm sure you got to be with family and comfort each other and all that good stuff. So very Tolkienian of you, Christian. Yeah, so thanks. And then we'll move on down to Will. Will, tell us a little bit about your Tolkien life.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit longer years of life than you guys. So I've been around the block a little bit longer than y'all. But I will say that my first experience of remembering Tolkien and Lord of the Rings and Hobbit are the 1976 and 77, 78 cartoons, The Hobbit and the Lord of
Oh
the Rings,
yeah.
those specials. So I do remember gathering around. I was a kid, a Star Wars kid. First movie I saw was A New Hope in the theater in 77, and then loved dinosaurs and comic books and Saturday morning cartoons. So anything with like superhero and fantasy and swords, I was all in. And so I remember my parents turning on like the TV CBS special of the Hobbit cartoon and the Lord of the Rings, and not really knowing what it was, but just it was cool. It had dragons, it had swords, it had all kinds of myths and wizards, and I dug it. I wasn't a big reader as a kid. I loved comic books and like surf magazines, but didn't read a lot. My parents always tried to get me to read, but I remember them trying to check out like a Narnia book, for the church library one summer. And I just, I'm trying. I'm not doing it. I'd rather do other things. But when I a little bit older, teenage land, high school started, my faith started to become a little bit more important to me. A little bit, I had a little more ownership of my own faith, and decided to become a camp counselor. And while I was a camp counselor that summer, back in the day, before like internet and phones, and you just had your cabin and take books, I blazed through all of the Narnia books, and it was so magical for me. And camp for that, I was like, well, I'm gonna pick up The Hobbit, and so I read The Hobbit that summer, and then when I got back home in the fall, sophomore year of college, picked up Lord of the Rings and just blazed through those. And I remember at the end of is it the end of the Two Towers is when Shelob like captures the hobbits, and they're
Yep.
like it's a big cliffhanger. I
Yeah.
remember like finished reading that book like at night and immediately found like a 24/7 like bookstore and drove immediately to get the next book because I want to see what's going to happen next. Like I knew the legend of through the cartoons, the story and the outline, but I had to read the book. So I immediately went and got it. So yeah, I've been a fan, and of course, when the movies were coming out, I just like could not wait to see how they adapted it, and was rereading the books along with the movies to see what they added and what they did. So I was a little disappointed when they put Shelob in the Return of the King of the movie
Right.
instead of the Two Towers. So looking for Shelob in the Two Towers. I remember leaving that movie so disappointed, like, no, that was so good. I was like, no, where's that damn spider? But I just and then as a part of my life, it's just been a part of my fandom, and love geeking out with you guys around Tolkien and the movies and the books. It's been a hot minute. I did reread The Hobbit when before the movies came out, and then of course, like a lot of fandom was pretty disappointed what they did with the Hobbit movie.
Yeah.
But I reread The Hobbit there, and I'm due for a Lord of the Rings reread. Try to read the similarity a couple times and made it through and skim some parts and just try to grab. And then I do like Rings of Power. I think that's a cool way to open up some of the legends and the appendix and dive back into that world, similar to what they're doing with Star Wars, kind of expanded universe, Tolkien expanded universe. And then just been a lifelong fan of Lewis and Tolkien and their friendship. And we'll talk more about kind of their fellowship and the Inklings and how that applies to systematic geekology. And they were the first geekologists. They did systematic geekology before we did. They gathered around a pint and a fire and geeked out and talked about Norse myths and geeked out about Thor. So they did Across the Bifrost before Ryan did it. Before Ryan did it, they were doing it. So we're just following in their footsteps of geeking out and being geekologists and doing that. So that's and where I accepted Tolkien into my heart in college and still there.
Amen.
That's
Amen. As a Tolkienist and a Tolkien evangelist, I just the hallelujah is just it's urging
blow
to
a ring
come
circle,
out of my
buddy.
chest.
Blow a smoke ring. Blow a smoke ring in honor.
Of our boy, our Lord and Savior. No, I love that. I love both those stories, the movies, and then the cartoons, and getting into the camp. Because also, I'll come back and kind of reflect off of y'all's experience with some of mine. But I also encountered Narnia and The Hobbit at a summer camp as well. But yeah, so I appreciate you sharing, Will. And then Joshua, tell us about your Tolkien experience.
Stay on track. Stay on track. Stay on target. Stay on target.
Listen, you know better. No, good question. I'm not 1,000% sure what my first one was. I always thought that it was Lord of the Rings. Whenever the movies came out, so at first, the first few movies came out, I wasn't allowed to watch because my parents thought they might have been too violent. I don't think it was until the third one came out on. This is really weird. PSP had like the videos you could get, and that's when I watched the third Lord of the Rings and Pirates of the Caribbean. And watching the third Lord of the Rings without seeing the other ones is really confusing. So then I ended up watching all of them, obviously. That's the first time I remember watching Lord of the Rings. But having recently watched the Rankin Bass Hobbit film, some of those songs, I'm like, I remember these, and I'm like, I think there's a chance I might have, I think, rented the VHS version of that from Blockbuster before Lord of the Rings came to PSP. I'm not 100% sure, but it's somewhere in there. I always liked all the movies. The Hobbit came out, and I enjoyed the first one and a half a lot, and then the rest was okay. I really liked what they did with Thorin's stuff, like at the very end. So like they won me back. They just lost me with some of the Legolas and other stuff.
Yeah, the weird gold
Yeah,
statue with
the added
Smaug.
stuff. I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
just this didn't need to be here. Um, then once I started reading the book, I really liked the Silmarillion, so that became my favorite. And I would always tell people like I liked Lord of the Rings, but I wouldn't call myself like a huge fan because like people who are Lord of the Rings fans are like usually like super intense, and I'm like I don't know. I'm bad with names, so I'm like
I
I
don't
don't know
know,
that
dude.
stuff.
You
I
like
know some
post on some
stories.
very niche things
Yeah,
about
that's
the end, like the eschatological ending
that's
of
what
Middle Earth.
that's why I was like then I met Nick, and you make me feel good about my fandom, and you're like, Josh, no, you actually do know a decent amount, and now I feel more comfortable calling myself a Tolkien geek. I'm like I guess I am in this camp. I'm just not as like intense, and I'm not as good as like remembering names off the top of my head. And since Christian mentioned the two that he reads the most, the Hobbit is what he reads the most. I think what I reread the most, and this is probably because I'm ADHD, I have a short attention span, so I like short stories that make me feel something. Probably going to be the Ainulindale from the
Oh
Silmarillion,
yeah.
and then the debate of Finrod and Andrith in Morgoth's
Ooh.
Ring, because that little discussion about death. I think I've reread that every time one of my grandparents have passed away or like a close
Mm.
family member. I don't know what it is because it's not like a comforting tale. It just makes you think about death in a way that I don't know. It helps me, so I do
I
it.
love that.
Yeah.
Get in there, Christian.
Oh yeah, Joshua unlocked one of my most favorite memories in the world, and I don't look like a good person with this memory, but it was a mutual friend of ours, Matt Bailey, in college. We were watching in the Lumina Theater there at UNC Wilmington the second Hobbit movie. What's that? The Desolation of Smaug. And
Yes.
Mhm.
we were getting towards the end, and I was looking at his face because he's way more into the Lord of the Rings than I am, especially at that time. And he was like, "No, no, this is where they end it," and I just busted out laughing because I know how much more he cares about it, and and just to see the look of like despair on his face. Like I said, I don't look great at this memory, but it just gave me life.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
That's
when
so
you
funny.
don't know what's going on and you see another nerd like just break down a little bit, like over something so minute that no one else would get, you're like, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. See, but it is a thing, and I'm not going to derail us on this, but like there is a thing of like how much you care about an IP sometimes does have to do with like the fandom itself. Like there's a
Totally.
culture of the fandom, uh, and people like Nick and Trip Fuller made me more like actually appreciate the culture because I'm like, oh, it's not all evangelicals who hate people, and it's not all like the kind of nerds that get really, really mad that you pronounce an Elvish name in an Elvish language that doesn't exist. You know, like there are people who are actually pretty chill and just are like, hey, man, it's cool that you love these stories too. But yeah, which same thing can be said of Supernatural, and hopefully I'm that for someone who enjoys that show because the Supernatural fandom sucks.
I did not know that.
That's
Amen.
all. No, they're awful.
No, I'll second that.
And I, as somebody who loves Tolkien, and I was accepted by people who were very chill. Now, of course, just like any other fandom, toxic people, and I'm pretty sure you've probably seen some online threads where people get really upset when people don't pronounce certain names right or don't, trill their R's when they're speaking Elvish or whatever. But ultimately, like for me, if you love Tolkien, even if you like the movies, whatever, you're a Tolkien geek. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's no stipulation there for me. Like, I'm like, if you love anything related to Lord of the Rings or Tolkien in general, why would I disparage that? And I think
Yeah.
that's something that y'all kind of emphasize anyway.
Yeah.
But
You know,
go for it.
oh, I just wanted to make Will have to take a drink. I'd say Kingdom Hearts has the exact opposite problem where they're so excited that you like the same thing that it's annoying. Like you're like, oh yeah, man, I played the first Kingdom Hearts. Like, oh no, that means you're a real fan. You remember what Sephiroth, and then you're like, well, like come on a whole spiel, and it's like, dude, it doesn't have to be that serious. Like it's like the exact opposite of the you mispronounced that thing, Ryan. And it's more of a wait a minute, you are holding a key. You know what keys are? That means it's like okay, calm down.
Well, Tolkien poppers, for those who aren't familiar with systematic geekology, will say that there's no shortage of things to geek out on. That's why I have like 14 hosts, whether it's not just Star Wars and Marvel and comic books and sci-fi and fantasy. It's anime, it's video games, it's even Kingdom Hearts, which Joshua talks about a lot. And I should have
Yeah.
known that in a Tolkien podcast, he would bring up Supernatural and Kingdom Hearts. It would come up at some point. That's why I had my drink ready. But yeah, like we it's not like we coined the phrase, but being a geekologist, have gone a little deeper into the things we geek out on. They entertain us, but also, they present themselves with really deep questions about how we navigate the world and how we see the world and the lens by which we view the world, our hermeneutic, our geek hermeneutic per se. And I think, sorry, my lights just went out, but the Tolkien does that too. And yeah, just it's gonna be, if you're listening to a Systematic Geekology podcast that Josh was on, just if you want to make a drinking game out of it, and whether it's water or beer, be careful if you got to drive somewhere, because he's going to bring up Kingdom Hearts.
And Nick, is this being uploaded as a video? Because we just got to see the introduction of Will the White.
That's right.
Will the
That was
White.
great.
I have not worked on transitioning things to videos yet. At some point, I will get nerdy and probably maybe do like some re-releases or something with people's permission. But if it does, I will be titling the episode for YouTube as Will the White, and
Oh, yeah.
I will find a way to
Oh, yeah.
Photoshop your head.
I was
onto
gray, and then
the body
became
of
white.
Ian McKellen.
And then
Nick,
I forgot how
I
to
just
things Joshua said.
I think you're gonna appreciate this, Nick, a lot.
Okay.
Talking about our experiences with Tolkien, so we're getting back on track with this. Look, my wife for the first time ever decided to watch the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit movies.
Yes.
So we watched them straight through, and she was like, "Where do you start?" And I was like, I'm prepared for that question in Star Wars. I've never had someone ask me that with Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, and I was like, "Man, I don't know." So we ended up starting with the Hobbit and just watching all the way through. And when we went through Star Wars, I would try not to spoil things, but she would ask me something, and I would say, "Who could ever say?" Which always meant yeah. She'd be like, "Wait a minute, is Obi-Wan really dead? Who could ever say?" So we're going through this, and like, what happens to Gandalf in Fellowship of the Ring? And she's like, "You told me people could die. You didn't tell me Gandalf could die." I was like, "Who could ever say? I don't know."
I'll have to tell you that.
And then she was like, "Wait a minute, but he's back and he's Gandalf the White. Did Gandalf die?" And I was like, "I mean, yes, asterisk."
Asterisk. There's always an asterisk in
Yeah.
Tolkien's works. But I had my wife.
Yeah.
We made a deal where, so she's reading Lord of the Rings for the first time, and I exchanged. So I'm reading A Court of
Nice.
Thorns and Roses, which, if you don't know, is a romantasy series, very popular. So we're exchanging. I have to read 5 books, and she only has to read, 3. But she's enjoying it.
6,
But
depending on how you count.
yeah, 6 books, 3 volumes. Look at this, Joshua keeping me on track.
Yeah, there you go. I love it. There you go.
But yeah, so she, I spoiled it too, because similar to Will experiencing Shelob at the end of Return of the King, the Fellowship of the Ring takes the beginning of the Two Towers movie, and Boromir dies at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring when he dies at the beginning of the Two Towers books. And I spoiled Boromir's death for Kelly, and it was unfortunate. She's, she wasn't as,
Yeah,
she's
that's
like
fine.
not as impacted by it, but anyway. So we're talking about different levels of fandom here, our experiences, our friends, our family, and the different levels here. And then Will was connecting things to systematic ecology and kind of your hermeneutic and approach to stuff. But specifically, I'm going to bring us as like fellow Middle Earth enjoyers, like where do you see Tolkien's works and the fandom as like contributors to the pop cultural conversation that systematic ecology tries to cultivate?
Well, I'll say we're not going to have a lot. Oh, did you say Will first? I'm sorry.
No, anybody.
Oh, okay. Had a bit of internet lag there. I'll say we're not going to have. I'm not going to say we're not going to have every single fantasy fandom that exists because there was stuff. You know, Conan the Barbarian was being published around the same time. Of course, you've got Lovecraft, and it's a certain different kind of fantasy in that regard. But what Tolkien does is he establishes the trope examples to a new generation that is bred into the next generation of writers that carries on. There's plenty of fantasy series written in the 60s and 70s that I have never read, but I've heard are really good. Like I think it's like the Moorcock Chronicles or something like that is inspired by this. And if I say anything wrong, please correct me. But then, of course, we have tons of movies that are developed as a result of this too. And then when they and probably the biggest for me personally would be D&D is heavily influenced by Tolkien's work. And without that, like, I mean, sure, you could still say that there are things that would be around for something like that to be created, but all the Gygaxes and all the other early illustrators and I almost said competitors, wrong word, contributors to the original first edition would not have everything they have without someone like Kim. And yeah, fantasy stories have been around for forever. Mythologies have been a thing across the entire world, but he takes those things and it wasn't one of his motivations to like create a new mythology for the British Isles in a sense, built off of older things because he did like his translation of Beowulf and certain other texts that are close, but like Britain doesn't have it in the same way as other nations did.
Right.
And then like till today, like its impact is undeniable. We don't have what we have to the extent that we have it now without him putting in the work that he did. And I'm extremely grateful for that.
Yeah, it's huge. I think, even going far back, the first edition, Gygax had hobbits, and he got sued by the Tolkien estate and had to change the race of hobbits to halflings. Right, or the cease and desist, rather. Yeah. Also, fun fact, Will, we did a D&D sesh at the last Theology Beer Camp, and
yes, we did.
Joshua was Gollum, but Will played Aristor. Yeah. And I'll leave it to the Tolkien nerds out there that Will was Aristor, and he did an awesome spell that that was a giant middle finger to taunt the orcs, and it was epic. I have a picture.
Yeah, that's pretty enjoyable.
Incredible.
It worked out. It worked out great. Yeah, and I guess what I'll just add, I totally agree with Christian. I think it's that they were trailblazers in a sense of being geekology in a sense that they were gathering around pints and pipes and talking about the things they geeked out on and the stories. They didn't have necessarily Star Wars or sci-fi, but they had Thor, they had Norse mythology, they had the myths of old, and their own story creative, their own creative writing and myth making. And so I recommend the book by John Hendricks, The Myth Makers, in terms of the relationship that Lewis and Tolkien had together. That's illustrated beautifully, literally, and with words about their friendship and how they fed off one another and challenged each other with their writing, their creativity, and getting their works out there. And so they didn't seek to change the game when it comes to fandom and fantasy and what we know it today, but yet their words got out there and their stories got out there and God took it where God wanted to go. And I think we're following in their footsteps in terms of what we're doing and thinking through these things and thinking deeper and having fun with friends over beer and pipes and geeking out with stuff. So that's where I see it. And I think Christian bringing up D&D, I think is huge. Like role-playing game, fantasy, putting ourselves in the story and trying to imagine ourselves where we would be, who do we resonate with, relate with, see ourselves in. And I think Tolkien wrote his characters that you could see yourself in all the characters and relate to all the characters. Some days I feel like Gandalf, some days I feel more like Gollum. And so where am I in this story and how it's shaping me? So what we do at Systematic Geekology is we wouldn't do it at all if it wasn't for Tolkien and his inklings.
I love that.
Yeah, I whenever we were watching the movies with my wife, this is what it makes it so easy for me. Is like we just did this and we're going through, and she's like, "Isn't that just a Dementor?" And I'm like, "Where do you think the idea came from?" And we're at the part with like Frodo in the volcano, and she's like, "Is this just Anakin on Mustafar?" And I'm like, "I mean, a little bit." And she's like, "Where like you think he's going evil, but he's actually the chosen one?" And I'm like, "Who could ever tell?" Then yeah,
Nah,
It's just like, man, yeah, like it's just so crazy watching this. And she's like, did everybody just take his stuff? And I'm like, I mean, yeah, honestly, everybody's been inspired by it, basically, you know?
It's funny because Tolkien literally just stole a bunch of stuff from like Beowulf and ancient myths, and then still steal is a little too. Now Beowulf, he literally did steal stuff, which is kind of funny, but it's in the public domain. No one knows who the author is. It's fine, but then everybody just he took inspiration from everything else, and then everyone's inspired by him. And like we've talked, like everyone here has talked about, like not only his writing but his personal life too within the realm of systematic geekology. And everyone here is we're religious in this group because there'll be people who listen to this who aren't. And one of the things that I thought about was friendship, everything that connected to what y'all were saying, D&D, talking, reading it with or watching it with your wife, and then like friendship and getting together with people and having and deepening those relationships through shared experiences and shared loves of fandoms, or at least even just growing in fandoms and encountering something new. Almost has like a sort of quasi like religious experience, to the point where it almost feels like some of the most deepest part of us can only be expressed and experienced in the shared love of these IPs or fandoms. And I know that's obviously Tolkien is very much that for me. But for each of you, I guess just taking us off track a little bit from Tolkien, unless this question specifically applies to Tolkien for you. But I want to know, like, what have been some of the fandoms you guys have explicitly experienced a sense of belonging, restoration, and community in?
I'll start. What I think about is like I like the idea of Tolkien the story being a sacred text. Like yeah, we gather in communities with sacred texts and we read them together, and then we have homilies about them, and then we're shaped by them and we study them and we think critically about them and pick them apart and look at the nuance within it. Hopefully that's happening in our communities of faith, and it happens in the fandom world too. So at Theology Beer Camp, we're going to have Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, that dude who's going to come and be a part of that. And I think you guys have done that here and with Trip over times. Like there's a reason why tears and the offering plates being passed around after Trip goes on his little homily about the friendship between Sam and Frodo, and we're all like crying in there and raising the toast with the
Hell yeah.
sacrament of beer and sacred text. So I think that's happened. But for me, my now. I really love comic book and I love sequential art and graphic novels, and that's been a part of my fandom and my weekly kind of tradition. And so the local comic shop becomes my place where I gather and have my pull list, and I talk to my local comic book employees and friends and say, what are you reading? What should I read? And then the larger version of that are Comic Cons that where we've had panels to talk about finding God in comics or finding the sacred in our fandom and how that plays out. So those communities of the local comic store and then bigger comic book conventions and gathering around that, and then even things like Theology Beer Camp that help us community, not just kind of our communities of faith on a Sunday. But that's what I think of when I think of community and friendship. Now, again, of course, anywhere human are going to human, and it's going to get toxic anywhere. So Comic Cons can be that way, fan can be that way, even local comic shops. If it becomes toxic and they look down on you and demean you or look down on what your pull list of that week, and find a new comic shop. Just like if you go to a church and they're being shady to you, then find a new church. So I think for me, I think of my local comic shop. I'm a Wednesday warrior that goes in and gets my local pull and can't wait to see them. And it looks like they're happy to see me, not just because I'm buying things, but because like, oh, what are you reading this week? What's going on in your life? Let's check in. That's where I find it.
Wednesday warrior, I love it, dude. Love that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have a few answers to this. So my current best friend, I don't think we would be friends if it were not for Supernatural. As much as I am like, oh man, the fandom is not great. I sat down, I first went to college. I didn't know anybody. He was one of the people who helped me move into my dorm and was like, hey, have you seen this? And I'm like, nope. And I was like, I need to catch up immediately. And he's like, I'll give you a list of episodes that are okay to skip, catch up, let's do this. And like we would go to lunch and I would just be like, I'm at this season, we're doing this. And like that connection turned into so much more. same college. I met this guy named Christian Ashley, and to this day, me and my brother talk about this one time. We watched the season opening of Doctor Who and had these great burgers, and I'm like, yeah, I made a lifelong through friend through Doctor Who, right? Like, crazy stuff. Scotty Young comics in general, not just his Marvel stuff. I love his other stuff, but I remember when I had my car accident, I was in the middle of reading his run through Rocket Raccoon and Groot. Then Will takes me to a Comic Con Heroes Con in Charlotte. I didn't know Scotty Young was going to be there. And I'm sat there and I get to take a picture with this guy. And I'm like, hey, my pastor here, Will, and I just read the rest of your comic that I didn't get to finish because of this car accident. And it was like a really healing experience for me. And he was like, that's cool. And we took a picture and it was like a really cool moment. And I don't know, time and time again, the Kingdom Hearts fandom as a whole, it's just wonderful. Especially recently, it's even helped me realize that's part of like why my friend group is so diverse, because like Kingdom Hearts was PlayStation, and apparently I had no idea this was a thing. PlayStation was not what white people played. White people played the Xbox, and that's why I had so many diverse friends, because all the white people had Xbox and I was playing Kingdom Hearts.
Interesting.
And it's like, oh, cool. Okay. And I found that out. And then I was talking to somebody about it that we're going to have on our podcast soon. And she was like, yeah, a lot of people, like white people, find it really hard to make friends and they don't know like how to reach out. And it sounds like you just accidentally stumbled on like, that's just how you do it. You just find the way, like, what are these other people groups into? And I'm like, huh. Yeah, that's not why I did it. I did it because, ooh, Disney. And even a guy at my work, like we're both just huge Disney fans. And I'm like sitting there at work and I said something and he looked over at me one day and went, did you just quote Mark Davis? And I was like, yes, you know who Mark Davis is? And we're sitting there talking about Disney's Nine Old Men 5 days a week now. It's great.
Dude,
yeah, that's my rant over.
No, I love it. I'm also in like the multi fandom belonging with Tolkien, just my number one, but I love it.
Oh yeah, this one time I was talking about Tolkien and I met this guy Nick at Theology Beer Camp, and he invited me on his podcast Tolkien Pop, and I got to see his beautiful face.
Dude, that's crazy. Yeah. He sounds pretty cool.
It was great.
He sounds pretty cool. Christian, tell us about your fandoms, your loves there.
Yeah. Well, I'm super into Doctor Who, but I can't think of any memorable friendships I've made because of it. You know.
Oh, I love you too.
No, but that was really important. Like it helped to bring us closer together, and it's something that to this day. I mean, we had our most recent argument about the most recent season, and he's on one side of things, I'm on another side of things, and yet we came at the end of the conversation, as belligerent as I am as a human being, and saying we both love Doctor Who, and I appreciate that a lot. To get someone else's perspective, even though there's a reason he's known as Josh with the bad opinions, because oftentimes he very much is, and yet I love him anyways. Jesus died for him.
By the way. Not even joking, so far of all the new movies that came out this year that I've seen, Superman is my least favorite.
Oh my!
Just want to own my title for now.
Yeah. Go sit in the dunce corner.
Oh my gosh! So anyways, don't disappoint Joshua. And I'm running to the fridge to grab another stout. I'll be right back. Keep going, Christian.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, I gotta go get the laundry.
So I guess it's just gonna be you and I, Nick. That's fine because I really love you.
Oh, too.
Thank you, man. So another huge one for me growing up was Marvel. More Spider-Man overall, but I got into other Marvel properties, watching the animated series and like DC a little bit too, but I was always more Marvel than DC. And growing up with these characters and like, oh, this is what they're about. And then my dad, being a huge comic book collector he is, it helped bring us closer together in many ways. And he's like, hey, you know, you love Spider-Man. Why don't you read the comic series? You love Teen Titans. Why don't you read the new Teen Titans series? And we would just bond over that. And it was a huge part of me growing up and getting even closer to him. Like we've always been close, but it's always nice to have that extra thing that brings you even closer together. And later on, you know, as my fandom grew and like talking to people over the internet, I would meet people who was like, man, I'm not happy with what's going on. This was around the time of Civil War, One More Day. And that's where, for those of you who don't know, Spider-Man and Mary Jane sell their marriage to the Marvel equivalent of Satan in Mephisto. And it has not been overturned in almost 20 years, it feels. And one of the things that came out of that was me writing fan fiction. Now, I earlier had started with Star Wars. I'll get to that in a second. But I wrote a fanfic that I didn't know there was a term for this, but it's called a fix fic, where I was fixing the story that Marvel was making and having it actually logically, I hoped, make sense for how they could overcome them making a deal. What did it cost them to do something like that? And them being back together at the end, even though not everything is sunshine and rainbows. And I had a huge response from people that I have never once met before. And just even last month, I got an email because somehow my email account is still linked to my fanfiction.net account, even though I haven't uploaded there in like over a decade. And I was like, look, hey, this story means a lot to me because I see what they're doing in recent comics and I don't like what that is. And I get to look at this little slice here and like, yeah, you're not the main writer or anything. Yeah, it's not the actual continuity. But I got to enjoy something that actually made more logical sense than what we got. And your mileage may vary on that. I'm not going to say that I'm the best Spider-Man writer ever, but it connected me with someone who I don't know. And we got to bond over something like that. And that's hugely important to me. And the other one I would bring up would be Star Wars. Star Wars is one of my big ones. I saw those films at a young age. When the VHSs came out, when the re-releases were in the theaters in the 90s, and then the prequel trilogy came out. Is it a heavily flawed series? Absolutely. But you know what? It's mine. It's less flawed, shall we say, than something else that comes up along the way. But what I just had to throw that stray in there for Joshua's sake.
I
for me,
don't like about half of the sequel trilogy. Just my favorite happens to be the part that you hate.
Yeah, you like the wrong part, as per usual. But for me, a huge part of my fandom growing up was getting into the expanded universe, what is now Legends canon, after Disney, took control over Star Wars. And I was reading those books, a lot of them as they were coming out, getting into the New Jedi Order, the Swarm War, the Legacy of the Force, Fate of the Jedi, and being a part of a fandom where we were like speculating what's happening next. Do you think this character is going to make it or not? And just having our ideas thrown out there, building off of each other. And that's where I really got my start writing fanfics, and they're all very terrible, which I'm very glad they no longer exist unless I guess you could use the Wayback Machine, which why would you torture yourself like that? But it helped me grow as a writer to the point where later on, I'm not the most successful person in the world, but I have 4 books out there. And I had to start off writing terrible Star Wars fanfic to end up becoming, somewhat competent as time went on.
Mm-hmm. Also,
put in your 10,000 hours, work out your craft, and you're kind of again going back to the Inklings and them challenging each other to write their stories and to put it out there. I love that writer's challenge that they put to each other. Did we get Out of the Silent Planet because of that? They drew straws and who's going to get science fiction and who's going to get time travel or something. And they, some of these stories, beloved stories, because their friendship was challenging them to write something and put it out there in the world. And I love that, Christian. That's great.
And for all the Marvel execs that clearly listen to this podcast, I am Christian Ashley's agent. He lied. He is the greatest Spider-Man writer of all time, and I only demand half of what you pay him. That is all.
So half of nothing.
I would buy that.
What will pay.
Call it? It can't be the Amazing Spider-Man. It would be the
Amazinger.
The Amazingest. The Amazingest Spider-Man by
gosh, we've had sensational, spectacular,
amazing and amazinger Spider-Man
adjective lists
by Christian Ashley,
Peter Parker Spider-Man, and so much more.
That would be on my Wednesday pull list. Christian. I would add it to my pull list.
See, Marvel, all you got to do is pay me a measly $3 million for Christian Ashley to write your comics.
Dude,
I'd say absolutely.
Pay
DC
Christian
has that
like
now.
$100 a week for her page.
I don't care what they pay Christian. I care what they pay his agent, which is tell me.
I vote for the adjective scrumptulescent. That's what I vote for.
Scrumptulescent.
Yeah. That's a deep SNL Will Ferrell skit for anybody out there. I appreciate. There's not a lot of fanfic people out there. I actually have like a group of Tolkien friends who are scholars and fans who are deep into the fanfic community, and I know some of them listen here, so I think they'll be very happy to hear that experience from you, Christian. Represent the fanfic people. And like you said, doing stuff like that that, and it deepens relationships with people, even or connects you with strangers, to talk about things that you wouldn't talk about with other parts of the fandom. It helps you grow as an individual, grows relationships, and I think everyone here has articulated that in one way or another. And we've kind of hit the spectrum here. And of course, from different, like this is through different IPs, different mediums, right? Reading, writing, radio, whatever, video games, even. But these converge in a lot of different spaces. And of course, because these are so varied and the interactions are so diverse, our interactions also are diverse and contain like the entirety of the spectrum of human emotions, both positive and negative. I mean, these things are deeply personal, and I think these things also reflect like politics, right? Ethics, religion, and even within the worlds of these places, they explore those issues. So I wanted to ask before we go here, end on this question: why do y'all think it's important to recognize like this reality in our fandoms? And what can people do to make these diverse spaces places of flourishing rather than places of harm?
So I want to let the smarter people answer the second half of that because I don't actually know, and I would like to hear their answer. But the first half, I got to go to C.S. Lewis, and when he talks about reasoning, and he talks about it, our reason really is almost like something that stands guard, like a watchful dragon is what he calls it. And really, you've already made up your mind of what you want to believe, what you want to be true. And what your reasoning typically does, rather than come up with the right answer, is justify the answer you already want, is typically what our reasoning does. And what C.S. Lewis says story is able to do, imagination is able to do, is sneak past that guard to tell us a truth that we wouldn't let ourselves see.
Mm.
And that's why I think these things are so important, right? Like, there are so many truths that, like, I'll use Superman. There's so many truths in this new Superman movie that maybe people wouldn't stomach. Like, if I were to just to come out and be like, hey, man, maybe war in the Middle East is bad. Or, hey, man, maybe even squirrels' lives matter. And they would find it to make it political, and they would put their defenses up and be like, wait, what about what? Maybe if you just watched a Superman movie and you didn't buy into all the political commentary about it, and you just watched the story and tried to really see what was being said, like, sometimes the story can mean more. You're like, wait a minute, I can feel Superman when he says, I just don't want people to die. And you're like, yeah, me neither. Sometimes story is able to do a little bit more than arguing with people back and forth on the internet, perhaps.
Kindness is punk rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, baby. To build off that, like I think we try at Systematic Geekology to create a different kind of conversation that it's not like bait and switch or toxic or gotcha stuff. We want to be able to say geek out what you want to geek out on, and let's have healthy conversations around. Let's be able to be like passionate geeks, but also not be jerks about it, and when it comes to our faith and what we believe and how we see the world, and we try to manage our expectations. So the challenge in managing of expectations of we're not detached from our context, and either was Tolkien when it comes to the two world wars and what he was writing and ironing out in his own faith and how he saw the world. He was not detached from his context and his place in life and time and history, and so of course that came out through his works. And I think that comes out in our fandoms too, whether it's Star Wars, even our comic books, in terms of where they are now. Like, we might not like X-Men aren't written exactly like they were back in the 80s when I was collecting under Chris Claremont, but yet here we are in a post-COVID world and embracing diversity and late stage capitalism and post-COVID and MAGA and being able to see our queer friends who are see them as real, true human beings with dignity, like looking through the lens of that, through the lens of comics and creators who are writing those stories, and seeing that they're not detached from their context or in terms of what they're creating and what they're working out and the questions they present to us. So for me, I think within Systematic Geekology, we know we have a diverse group of backgrounds and genders and worldviews and even where we worship on Sunday, but we try to listen to one another and see each other, that we're valued, and hear from them, and in the midst of that, managing our expectations. We love these stories, we're passionate about these stories. So how do you manage your expectations going to Rings of Power? How do you manage your expectations when you go into the next Star Wars movie or series? So I think that's important as I see of like how we interact and relate to one another within these fandoms that really do shape. There are some of our sacred texts, not just the Bible. Is some of these works really are sacred texts. Spider-Man and him selling out to Mephisto is a wrong turn in Christian sacred texts. He was
Yes.
moved.
Yeah.
He was moved. Let me just say he was moved.
Hey, real quick, I want to say something about what Will said before Christian goes, because you're talking about like what systematic ecology does, and I remember a conversation I had early on about what I wanted it to be, and I think we've become this. And also, this conversation I remembered made me realize that we never did this episode that I used as an example of what I wanted it to be, and I'm now pitching it to Christian and Nick as an
Ooh.
episode we could do.
Okay.
Oh man.
So if they
100%
agree, this is a teaser of an episode that's going to be coming soon, the systematic ecology.
Ooh.
I remember I was talking to my friend I mentioned earlier, my supernatural friend. I was talking to him, but I was trying to describe what I wanted the show to be because he helped me come up with a name. And I was like, I really want it to be. And I said, there's a lot of Christian geek podcasts out there. Most of the ones I listen to, if they did a review of Dexter season 6, it would have been, here's what they said, and here's our defense of the Bible, and why, they're trying to act like Christianity isn't important, but it is important, and then a Bible verse at the end. And I'm like, what I want us to be instead is a show that looks at that and says, wait a minute, it's asking good questions. Maybe we should question whether or not there's God. Maybe we should question whether or not our children should be in a Christian daycare. Hey, I might at the end come to the same conclusions I'm at, that there is a God and that Christianity is good even for children. But the show is asking an important question, and instead of just fighting it, what if we actually engaged with those questions and didn't do a verse at the end, but said, hey, that's a good question. Let's talk about it. And that's what we wanted systematic ecology to be. And that was my example back then. And I feel like it's an episode we never did that maybe we could do. Nick hasn't seen Dexter yet. This is my lure. My first season I ever watched was season 6.
Ooh,
So I think you could follow in my footsteps.
I'll get on the Dexter train.
Yeah. Yeah, just a bitch.
You want to close us out here, Christian?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what these things get us to do for a little bit is escape from reality somewhat, but what they should never do is completely sever us from reality. And it's great. Sometimes I just need to play a dumb video game and just kill things that need to die and then move on with my life because I can't do it to the people around me because there's jail time. Or I need to read something important that someone else is saying through the lens of a Star Wars or Star Trek or a television series or what have you, and go, okay, they're talking about this issue I see here, like a 60s Star Trek is perfect for that. And how they addressed racism, how they addressed wars between nations, how they address the fact that, hey, there's an African-American woman on the bridge crew and they're not like making a big deal out of it. Or that, there's a Russian in the midst of the Cold War as a good guy along with other good guys. Like that didn't happen. And we need to talk about those things. Well, can we get to the point where we don't look at the Russians that same way? And yes, there's plenty of conversations to come back in a different way in our present time. But the idea being is like, look, they're human beings too. How do we address that? How do I stop looking at them as completely the other to the point where I make them something inhuman, where I make them something that they shouldn't be, where I would call them a Klingon or a Romulan or what have you. And therefore I can dehumanize them and it's okay when we just slaughter them endlessly. Like that's not a good idea. So there's something Star Trek does really well. I know for me on the religious side of things, what really helped me growing up, I mean, I'm just going to use my Bible fandom. Like I am a fan of the Bible. And what made me into who I am today is reading through the temptation of Jesus and seeing Satan using scripture to try and twist truth for his own ends. And me realizing at 12 or 13-ish years old, Satan knew more about scripture than me. So I was faced with the reality of, oh, I say I love this book. I say I'm a Christian. What does that actually mean now that I have been proven I'm not as good as I think I am? So that was the first time I ever read through the entire Bible at that age. And yeah, I didn't get everything, but that's okay. It's still a process of learning, of figuring things out. Like I do my own podcast where I Let Nothing Move You, where I go chapter by chapter, verse by verse. All these guys have been on there with me, and I am learning things on my. I've lost count. It's probably like 15 or so. Not to like brag, but like it's somewhere in that area of reading through the Bible completely. And that's part of learning is realizing just because you've read something earlier doesn't mean you fully understood it. You need to come back. You've experienced other things in that time. Come back to what you read before. Like that's like Lord of the Rings is perfect for this. You can read it at a young age. You can read it when you're in college. You can read it when you're in your 30s, 40s, and 70s, and you can go, wait, oh, I get this better because I experienced this, or I saw someone go through this. And another huge thing for me, uh, growing up was reading through Star Wars of all things. It's the Traitor book in the New Jedi Order series, and I saw questions being asked about morality that I wasn't getting in the same way at church. Not to say we weren't asking questions at all. It wasn't one of those churches, but it wasn't being asked in that way. And I'm like, I'm being confronted. What does it mean? Could I, if I were a Jedi, could I use Force lightning in a way that wasn't evil? Could I, if this animal here is killing more than it wants, is that animal evil, or is it just being an animal? Like, I don't know. Let me ask these questions, and that's what good fiction, good fandom should do is make us ask those questions, so that when we're wrestling with these very real topics, and there are other people in those fandoms who are dealing with something we don't get, we can listen. Where are they coming from? Why do they think the way that they do? Not everyone's going to know automatically. Well, when I was 15, I read Traitor, and that helped me form some of my morality along the way. Or I read the Bible at this age, and that helped form my morality along the way. I need to get where did you get here from? What clicks with you that doesn't click with me? And why do you think that way? How can I listen to what you have to say? And that doesn't mean I have to change. If it's something I need to change, yes, change. But listen to what they have to say. And I think that's one thing we do really well at Systematic Geekology. As the most belligerent person on the show, I'm very opinionated. And there are times when I have to pull myself back and say, okay, Joshua legitimately thinks Last Jedi is a good movie. He legitimately thinks that Brave New World is a good Marvel movie.
Oh, it's one of the best.
I don't. But at that same time, I have spent plenty of time with him before. We've agreed on other things. So it doesn't mean I break fellowship simply because he has a bad opinion. If I did that, we wouldn't be friends. So let me see where people are at, love them where they're at, and we can have a conversation around that.
Yeah. Can I Nick,
can I just add real fast that I was really moved by that last no,
I actually I want to add like just two quick things if it's okay, Nick.
Sure.
It's your show. Okay. One, and I think this actually answers the second part of your question. I think I figured it out while Christian was talking. We do the same thing with our fandoms that we can do with the Bible, and I think that the one of the good ways to test if it's a healthy relationship or not is you have fans and Bible people, I'll just say people of faith, who will do this all on a object level, a fundamentalist level, whatever kind of thing. Like I'm going to argue of like, oh, well, this text of the Bible here, this translation technically could have been the Reed River and not the Red River, and we're going to do a whole debate, an argument around this thing, or like this correct. Are you trilling your R's when you're doing Elvish? And those kind of fans, like they're focusing on the objects and they're making it all about that. And that's when you start doing these arguments and things start getting kind of toxic. And it's like, that's not what we want. I really think it's healthier when you have the conversation around the meta level. Why was it that Jesus was able to answer the devil in his temptation in the desert, right? Like going to Christian's thing, or like, why is it? Not, like for me, Kingdom Hearts, there's multiple reasons I can play Kingdom Hearts. It's usually not because I like going to cool Disney places. It's true. But usually it's because I want to comfort. It's a place of comfort for me. Or it's because like the messaging in it, I'm playing Chain of Memories for like the 12th time this year or something. Because I realized that Chain of Memories is all like, hey, are you your memories? What does it mean? Are you still you if you don't remember everything? Is your relationship with another person based on your memories of them? Or is there something deeper there? And like I'm engaging with this meta narrative that's happening in this game and wrestling with these questions. And I think that's when it's more healthy. And that's what we're meant to do. And my final thing, and I think this is really important. I think all of us have a fandom that is like Ted Mosby on How I Met Your Mother and his relationship to Star Wars. And I think it is okay to have this, and we need this as humans. When Ted almost got married once, his best friend was talking to this lady. He's like, wait a minute, you can't just pretend to watch Star Wars. Because for Ted, this is what Star Wars is. He goes to it in sickness and in health. He goes to it when he's old, when he's sad, when he's happy. He's going to go to Star Wars. It's always been there for him, and it always will be. For me, that's Kingdom Hearts, right? Like when my grandparents died, what do I want to do? I want to play Kingdom Hearts and get my mind off things. When I'm just bored, I want to play and engage with something that excites me. When I'm talking to somebody, if I just have my choice of anything, we're probably going to talk about Kingdom Hearts. Will's probably Star Wars, right? Christian, probably Spider-Man, maybe also Star Wars, actually. I'm not sure. But, you know, like Nick is probably Tolkien. And I think it's good that we have these things because it helps us find meaning, give meaning, and just have something to go to. Sometimes you just need somewhere to go to.
So you're in a covenantal relationship with Kingdom Hearts? Is that what you're saying? You guys took vow?
Yeah, I think so.
Take vow?
I think so, yeah.
That's, and that's why I had to run to the fridge to get another stuff because I knew there would be more references, and I ran out and I was the drinking games. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, he's on top of it. What a guy. Prepared. That's a pastor you want right there.
Yeah.
I know what's coming.
I have multiple friends who are Kingdom Hearts people, and it's just too real. You get bombarded with all the YouTube videos, and I appreciate the desire to want to be included. But I'll reflect on everything y'all said because I've talked about the friendship, and I think what y'all bring up is like this openness to hearing other things and nuance, right? Not just having black and white viewpoints about certain IPs or even like the Bible to a certain extent, or at least if you have black and white opinions, to at least be open to hearing that those black and white opinions, other people might have the opposite sort of viewpoint, correct? And so part of this, I think what Tolkien says related specifically to fantasy, but I think it applies to all sorts of art forms, and even it can be related to human conversations like the one we're having right now, is Tolkien says that the point for fantasy or art is, one of the points is escape. And not like escape is like we're ignoring reality, but we're taking that brief moment, as Joshua talked about with Ted Mosley with Star Wars, that we come to it, we go into it, and it's, the world is full of problems that humans have made ourselves, right? Where we've almost created a prison for how horrible some things are in the world, right? And Tolkien says we're escaping the prison, right? And that once we come back out of the fantasy world, we come back refreshed, right? So we've escaped the prison and we see the real world. It's re-enchanted for us, okay? And we want to, it consoles us, and then we are ready to go back into the world and face it anew, and hopefully with hope and desire to create a better world in our fandoms, our religious spaces, in the world, and in nature, even our non-human neighbors. So systematic geekology and these conversations, and Tolkien specifically, like, this is the stuff I live for. So after this conversation, I feel like I'm going to be refreshed and ready to face the world and hang out with people and do some more stuff. So I appreciate you guys. Before we go, one last thing before, if you guys want to hear more of everyone here, Systematic Geekology is a podcast. They're all over the place. Anazal Ministries podcast has a bunch of stuff like Christian's podcast that he mentioned, Let Nothing Move You. They have a YouTube channel where they do lots of other stuff. And I guess, too, if you want to be there and hang out with these guys in person, Theology Beer Camp is happening this year, October 16th through the 18th in St. Paul, Minnesota. And there'll be links in the show notes to everything that we mention here, but there'll be links for tickets for Theology Beer Camp if you want to hang out and drink, talk philosophy, theology, and a little geekdom. So
and just to build off that, like Nick, the reason that like Trip acknowledged like a geek stage, and this year is going to be called Pop Culture Stage, is because these things that happen with then these stories are adjacent to what's going on in philosophy, theology, and communities of faith when these conversations and questions that we have. So I think it's brilliant that the part of a theology conference or a philosophy conference is that pop culture, geek culture is there along with it, because they're often asked the exact same questions going on. And you can find on our Systematic Geekology YouTube page me having an interview with John Hendricks from The Mythmakers, wrote that book with the friendship between C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. And I did see at San Diego Comic-Con that he announced that they're making it into an animated movie, either in the theaters or on a streaming service. They're going to like illustrate it and put it out there as an actual movie, this friendship between Lewis and Tolkien and the effect they had on one another and the stories that they created. So I'm pretty excited how that's unfolding and evolving as well. It's pretty cool.
Hell yeah. Love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll shoot you links to everything that you might want to include. We're going to be doing an all reading counts on Systematic Geekology soon, talking about appendices and prologues in books. So we'll probably get some Tolkien in there.
Ooh, yes. Extra nerdy. Christian, what about you? Anything?
Yeah, like I said, Let Nothing Move You. That's where I go chapter by chapter, verse by verse to the Bible. I've done Luke, Romans, the Pentateuch. I'm in Matthew now. So if that interests you, you want to hear more conservative side of things, head that way. If it's not, go in peace. As well, I'm also on Friday Night Frights, where we every now and then, once a month, if we keep the schedules, Joe Day and I will go through a cryptozoological topic, ufology, true crime, paranormal, and more. That's also released in podcast form. And if you want to see more Nick and I talking Lord of the Rings, specifically the animated films, we did an episode not too long ago with Kevin Schaefer around the time Lord of the Rohirrim came out, and that was a fun time. So I highly recommend that.
Yeah, that was so much fun. I love Kevin. I need to have him on here too, who's also another systematic geekologist, and Kevin is just an awesome guy. But yeah, so everyone here, go check out everything everyone said. I'll have links to everything, and my fellow geeks, you know, I can't. I don't know. I feel like I can't take the systematic geekology tagline, you know, but I feel like it's appropriate here, you know, that we are that everyone should. I'm gonna kick it here. This is the ending, y'all. So this is just a little tease for you to go check out Systematic Geekology. But I would just remember, everyone, that oh wait, now I don't remember.
I was hoping that would happen.
I do it too. That's why I have it written down.
Someone closes out.
Remember, The Last Jedi was a good movie.
Don't you dare end it with that. Not that heresy. I let many things slip through. Remember, we're all a chosen people, like geekdom of priests.
Amen and hallelujah.